Hi everyone, it's Jay from Mitosu Crafts. Thank you for joining me today. We're an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrators based in the UK, so if you live in the UK, France, Germany, Austria, or the Netherlands, you'll be able to purchase current Stampin' Up! Products from our online shop at mitosocrafts.com. I'm hopping along with the Creating Kindness design theme with the theme of colored pencils. Be sure to check out the description below for the next video in the hop for more card making and papercraft inspiration from the Creating Kindness design team. The Stampin' Up! Products I've used today are Fable Friends stamp set, watercolor pencils, memento ink pad, well-written dies, coastal weave 3D embossing folder, Stampin' Chalk marker. You'll also need thick Whisper white cardstock and your favorite adhesive. So starting off with a panel piece of 5.1 centimeters by 14 centimeters or 2" by 5.5". Stamp the rabbit and grass in memento ink towards the bottom of the panel. I placed a pad of paper underneath to protect my project, taking on the texture of the table. The thick Whisper White has actually got a slight texture to it, so it does add a nice interest to your colored project than a normal Whisper White cardstock. I'm using Pacific Point for the midtones, Bermuda Bay for the lights, and Basic Black for the shadows. Add the colors with a light pressure, so if you do make a mistake, you can easily rectify this by erasing with the rubber. Alternate between these colors and add more pressure to build up the colors. I'm using short back and forth strokes and following the image lines, adding shadows where I feel is right. This helps to make the image more three-dimensional and stand out from the panel. So I encourage you to add basic black shadows where you feel is correct for your image. I finished off the bottom half of the rabbit and then the ears before moving on to the hands, which doesn't actually need that much coloring, but I still use the same colors as before and adding shadows where I believe there would be shadows with the basic black. For the face, I started off with Bermuda Bay, adding curved lines starting from the eyebrows towards the nose, and then moving on to Pacific Point and lightly adding that color around the eyes. Again, making sure that it is light enough so if I do make a mistake, I can erase it with rubber. I added a hint of Pacific Point under the face for a bit of shadow and Bermuda Bay along the forehead and around the cheeks before moving on to use Melon Mambo around the nose. I went back with Pacific Point just to intensify the colors around the eyes, and to finish off, I used chalk markers just to make the highlights in the eyes bigger. For the top, I'm using pumpkin pie, rich raspberry, and early espresso. Starting off with pumpkin pie, I colored around the top where I believe the highlights would be. Then moving on to early espresso where the shadows are before blending those two in using rich raspberry. Once I was happy with the color placement, I went back with all three colors, adding more pressure to intensify the image. I also ended up using basic black to darken the shadows and the Stampin' white chalk marker for highlighting the top. If you are going to use the chalk marker ensure that every time you apply it on your project, it is nice and clean. So you can do this by cleaning it off on a scrap piece of paper, as it does pick up the watercolor pencils. For the background, I'm using the colors I've used on the rabbit image as well, starting off with pumpkin pie, Bermuda Bay, and rich raspberry. I am randomly coloring back and forth and creating a square-ish marks around the rabbit. I am adding these colors lightly, so when I add another layer, they will look like blurred flowers. Along the grass line at the bottom of the panel, I used early espresso following the grass stamped image with short flicks to add shadows and create depth. The next color I used for the background is Old Olive. I used the side of the coloring pencil to quickly cover the panel. When I was getting near the rabbit image, I used more of the tip, but making sure that I'm only coloring it lightly. This panel is actually larger than what we need for our final card, as it allows for easy application of the Old Olive background. You can go back and intensify some of the square marks with pumpkin pie and Bermuda Bay, then add another layer of Old Olive with a bit more pressure for the background. To finish the top part of the panel, I use Bermuda Bay and Pacific Point, turning the panel to what is comfortable when I'm coloring. I use back and forth strokes up and down the panel, following the same lines as the Old Olive. Starting off with Bermuda Bay, using the side of the coloring pencil to cover the panel quickly. Then adding Pacific Point along the top and blending that in with the Bermuda Bay, adding more pressure as I go along. I alternated between these two colors and Old Olive to build up the background colors around the rabbit. You can add color with these watercolor pencils to create a water wash background, but for this card, I decided to use the watercolor pencils as is. Moving on to the bottom of the panel, I used Old Olive for the foreground. I followed the grass image first and did small flicks with more pressure to add more color alongside the early espresso. I changed my stroke from up and down to side, turning the panel where it's comfortable for me to do so. For me, this way enhances the separation of the background and the foreground even more. I then went and used the chalk marker to add highlights along the grass line, using the side a little bit more. So, as a reminder, when you are using the chalk marker, clean it after applying on your project. I then added clusters of small dots around the rabbit for more interest in the background. I turned the panel sideways. I replaced the chalk marker along the dots and swiped to the right, creating stalks for those small clusters. Once this is done, look back and admire your colored image. Check if there's any other areas you'd like to add more color or intensify before cutting it down to size. As you can see, I added more shadows with early espresso towards the base of the rabbit, as well as Old Olive to add more depth along the foreground. When cutting your panel to size, make sure that you bear in mind the placement of your rabbit for the final piece. I ended up trimming all four sides as I wanted to keep the rabbit's placement similar to how it was. So this panel is now 4.5 centimeters by 12.1 centimeters or 1 and 3/4 by 4 and 3/4 inch. For the thick Whisper White mat, I ended up using 4.8 centimeters by 12.4 centimeters or 1/7/8 inch by 4/7/8 inch. So this mat is 0.3 centimeters or 1/8 inch bigger than the colored panel. I then adhered both panels together with multipurpose liquid glue. For the card base, which measures 21 centimeters by 14.5 centimeters, folded in half at 10.5 centimeters, or 8.5 by 5.5 inch, folded in half at 4.25 inch. I've gone ahead and embossed with a coastal weave embossing folder. Just make sure that when you are doing so, you align the spine of the card along the edge of the 3D embossing folder. I've also gone ahead and die cut 2 flourishes from the well-written dies, 3 butterflies, as well as the wishes sentiment in thick Whisper White and basic black. A craft hack tip video on how to create your die cut sentiments like this with a lovely border is on our YouTube channel as well. I adhered the die cut elements, colored panels, and wishes sentiment on the card front with multipurpose liquid glue, snipping into one of the flourish die cut as it doesn't really need the full die cut element underneath the panel. I only add small dots of liquid glue on my die cut to help prevent it from squeezing out and making the card front a bit sticky. If this does happen to you, use an embossing buddy to rectify this problem. To finish off the sentiment, I decided to stamp the Happy from Happy Springs in Fable Friends stamp set. So I used the marker to stamp technique using black Stampin' Right marker. With the brush tip, apply ink only in the happy area of the stamp and stamp on another piece of Whisper White card. Adhere with mini stamping dimensionals to add height before finishing up with the 3 butterflies. Use paper snips to score the wings of the butterflies and adhere with multipurpose liquid glue. Be sure to check out the description below for the next Creating Kindness design team video, as well as links to our online shop where you can purchase current Stampin' Up products. You can also join our team, the Mitosu Stampers, to get future discounts on your craft supplies. If you've enjoyed this coloring project, please support us by hitting the thumbs up button and subscribing to our channel. Thanks again for joining me. Until next time, bye!